Alright, what's up everyone? Welcome back to Compound Interesting. This is Emil and this is the next installment in the Worth the Hype series, where we look at really highly valued stocks and fast growing speculative stocks with really high price to sales or price to earnings ratios. So in today's Worth the Hype series, we're having a look at Beyond stock, Beyond Meat. So Beyond Meat essentially is the biggest plant-based meat manufacturer in the world. So it creates artificial meat using just plants, and it's probably the best company at doing this, and it's actually growing extremely fast, and they've got some really interesting partnerships. Obviously this is an industry that a lot of people want to get into, and it's an extremely fast growing industry, especially vegetarianism, veganism. The entire industry is in extreme growth, and this is the only public company really that, if you want a direct play in this vegetarian shift of consumer mentality, this is the only direct play into that industry that you can invest in. So that's one of the reasons it's shot up so much. So from the outside, when I first looked at this company, I thought, okay, this one seems a little bit overhyped. I don't think I'd really be interested in it because of the reasons I explained. I just think everyone just wants to get into the industry and they don't care what price they're paying for the underlying company. However, after digging through the company a bit more, I actually started to get a bit more interested in the stock. So as usual, I'm going to run through all the bull points for this stock, for this company, and then all the bear points, the in-depth on the numbers, and then finally I'll give you my overall conclusion on the stock and what exactly I'm going to be doing in regards to this stock. So with all that said, I really hope you enjoyed the video, and let's get straight into it. So my sister's a vegan actually, and I noticed that she doesn't really eat very much fake meat. When she started transitioning from vegetarianism, or from meat eater to vegetarianism, she did kind of incorporate some artificial meat products. However, at the moment she's not really eating any of those products very often, mostly just vegetables. So that's why one of the reasons I was at first quite skeptical of the viability of this business model. I kind of think fake meat was only used for transitioning from meat eater to vegetarian or vegan. However, when I looked into this company, I saw their business model is a little bit different from that. So what they're actually trying to do is to convert the meat section in the supermarket to the protein section. Rather than just going after vegans and vegetarians, they're actually going after meat eaters and trying to convert the meat eaters to consume less real meat and maybe transition to fake meat, because maybe some meat eaters would prefer it for health benefits, for impact on the environment, and eventually down the road it'll be cheaper as well. So their mission statement is basically to make meat from plants that's indistinguishable from real meat. I think that's a really interesting mission statement when it's tied into the fact that doing this and achieving this goal will really help the environment and reduce animal cruelty. So it's definitely a good cause in that sense. However, on the health topic, I don't personally think real meat is unhealthy whatsoever, and I think meat substitutes it's going to be very difficult to make them as healthy as real meat, in my opinion. However, obviously they're quite biased, so they're saying that the fake meat is healthier than the real meat. But nutrition is one of those areas that's really hard to pinpoint exactly what's going on, because there's so many different factors to whether something is healthy or not. It's very hard to discern what exactly is healthy. But that was another thing that kind of put me off the stock, that I don't think it's actually very healthy. There's a lot of the second biggest ingredient in the burger patties and the sausage patties is canola oil, so that's definitely not healthy in my opinion and in most people's opinion. Yeah, apart from that, it's definitely a very compelling business model to really help the environment and reduce animal cruelty, and also eventually make meat cheaper, well, fake meat cheaper, and to make it indistinguishable from real meat that was from an animal, just using plants. A lot of the time I like to go after these 10x opportunities, and I think this is definitely a 10x candidate. So I like to have a good few bets in these kind of huge potential stocks like this one, like this company. This company has a huge, enormous potential in front of it and a huge industry to capture. However, it's still a very speculative stock because of, obviously, it's a very highly valued stock in any sort of price multiple. Well, the biggest bull point over the last couple of years is the amount of partnerships they've managed to create and secure. So they've partnered with the likes of Burger King, KFC, Dave & Buster's, Subway, Dunkin' Donuts, McDonald's, Starbucks. So all those huge restaurants are using Beyond Meat's products, using their burgers, their burger patties or their sausages in their restaurants. Now obviously that's extremely bullish, and I don't think those restaurants could really make a meat substitute as well as Beyond Meat could. So I think they will rely on Beyond Meat for their meat, or for their vegetarian meat, for the foreseeable future. And I think more partnerships are definitely set to come to Beyond Meat. Obviously one of the most important factors when it comes to this business model is the taste. And I've tried one of their Beyond burgers before from Burger King actually, and it was pretty good. It wasn't exactly the same as fake meat. There was just like something kind of missing when you bit into it, but it definitely wasn't, it was definitely tasty anyway. It was definitely nice. So that is definitely one good aspect of the product. So as we know, vegetarianism is growing and growing and growing. Currently there's 5% of the US are vegetarian, and 8% of the younger generation people are vegetarian. So like millennials like myself, 8% are vegetarian. But as I already mentioned, they're kind of also going after the entire market of meat eaters, not just vegetarians. And this is where things get really, really interesting. So meat, real meat, is the largest food category in the world, and worldwide it makes $1.4 trillion per year, and in the US alone it makes $270 billion. So $270 billion worth of meat sold in the US every single year. So currently Beyond Meat's market cap is 8.3 billion, maybe a little bit more because the stock price has actually jumped a bit today. So with a market cap of 8 billion, we're always looking for at least a price to sales ratio of 1 for a fair value. 1 or 2 is a fair value for price to sales ratio in the far future. Because with Beyond Meat, we can't really look at their price to earnings ratio because it's astronomical and it's not going to give us a fair representation of the company. So with these extreme growers like Beyond Meat and other stocks in the Worth the Hype series, I usually try to look at the price to sales ratio as a better metric to discover the valuation and see if it's overvalued or fairly valued or even undervalued, because its price to earnings is like 1,000 or something, which is obviously, it's not very useful as a way to measure whether it's undervalued or overvalued. So obviously all their extra earnings are kind of getting reinvested into the business. Oh yeah, so as I was saying, to get a price to sales ratio of 1, so to be making $8 billion in revenue, they would only have to capture 3% of the US meat sales in total. So just the US, not including international whatsoever. They just have to capture 3% of the meat sales in the United States, the total meat sales in the United States, to get 8 billion, because it's 270 billion in a year. So 3% of that is 8 billion. However, we also have to take into account the international exposure, which is growing so fast, even much faster than the US. So obviously Europe, there's a huge number of vegetarians in Europe, probably even more so than the US. And also further down the line, there's India and China, and India has a vegetarian percentage of 20%, which is obviously really high, but I've no idea whether they'll be interested in fake meat products. And China, I don't really think they'll be that interested in fake meat products, as China's percentage of vegetarians is less than 5%, so very low percentage of Chinese people are vegetarian. Another thing I really like about Beyond Meat is their innovation. So they're spending an enormous amount on research and development every year, and they're continually improving their products, and they're getting closer and closer to indistinguishability from real meat. So eventually, with time, there is the possibility that a Beyond Meat burger will be nicer or indistinguishable from a real meat burger. It's kind of like Tesla with the battery compared to the internal combustion engine. The prices of battery is coming down and the prices of internal combustion engines are going up. Likewise, the price of fake meat is coming down, whereas the price of real meat is going up. So real meat is getting more and more expensive every year, and Beyond Meat is going to become less and less expensive. So eventually it's going to be, I'd assume Beyond Meat aren't going to make their burgers really cheap, because then people won't buy them. However, they'll probably keep the price the same thereabouts the same as real meat. However, their margin is going to increase and increase and increase as the price of creating the artificial meat goes down. All right, let's quickly run through the numbers. Then we'll have a look at the bear points, and finally I'll give you my overall opinion. If you're liking the video so far, I'd hugely appreciate if you could smash the thumbs up button. It will help get this message out to more people. So thank you so much for that. And if you're enjoying these kind of videos and you haven't already, make sure to subscribe. So with their numbers, everything is looking pretty good apart from the price. The price of the stock is very high, and that's kind of making the price to sales ratio also very high. They're actually a profitable company, but their profits are pretty much negligible in comparison to the size of their market cap. So that's what's giving us that huge price to earnings ratio. However, they are profitable. They're not losing loads of money like some extreme growers. So that's a good first sign anyway. Their revenue growth is insane. So their yearly revenue growth was 300%, and this quarter's revenue growth compared to last year's quarter, same quarter last year, was 141% year over year. So this extreme growth is obviously going to warrant a high price multiple for the stock. So we have to look at future growth and to see whether that price multiple is justified at the moment with the future growth. And the future growth estimates are 50% a year for the next 2 years anyway. So we need to see, is this 50% growth, if they can keep that up every year for a number of years, will this company grow into this valuation and hopefully exceed it in the future? So a 50% growth in revenue for the next 2 years brings them up to a revenue of 675 million. So that's still pretty low in comparison to their $8 billion market cap. Remember, we're looking for a price to sales, this is a price to sales of still well over 10. This is a price to sales of 11 if we have 2 years of 50% growth, which is not an easy task whatsoever. However, if they manage to do it for 5 years, we get to a we get to a revenue of 2.3 billion per year. So after 5 years of 50% growth, which is also, I must reiterate, not guaranteed and is extremely difficult to do, but that brings us to a revenue of 2.3 billion, which would be a fair value in my opinion, which would give the current market cap probably a price to sales of 3 to 4, which is definitely fair enough for such an innovative company in such a fast growing industry. And now let's kind of extend it out for 10 years, a decade of 50% growth, and that would bring us to a revenue of $17 billion. Now this is a little bit of a pipe dream, and it's definitely something that would be very, very difficult to pull off. However, we can take into account what I mentioned earlier about the US meat sales being $270 billion per year. So if they captured maybe 5% of that and maybe 1% of the global meat sales, this revenue is definitely more than achievable. So if they manage to get to a revenue of the 20 or 30 billion per year I'm going to say it will take at least 5 years, if not 10 years to get to that kind of revenue. But if they got there, which is definitely not a guarantee, but if they got to that revenue amount and then we give them a kind of a price to sales ratio of 3 or 4 or maybe 5 in that range, we're looking at a market cap of $100 billion. So that's over a 10x from this point, even right now at this extremely high valuation. To add to this bull point, they have plenty of cash and not very much long-term debt, and that's because they're actually making money. They're not losing loads of money. So I always want to see a very good balance sheet, so that's another good positive. They're also twice the size of their nearest competitor in revenue terms. I think Impossible Foods is the name of their second closest competitor, and it's always nice to be betting on the leader in a space, especially a great company with great vision like this one. And we're kind of catching this company in the infancy of their growth. They're a really, really new company, and they IPO'd quite early in comparison to most companies are quite well established before they IPO. But their growth is just so extreme because they've gotten all these brands on board, because all these brands, all these restaurants needed someone to create this alternative meat product for the vegetarian customer segment that was underserved in all of those restaurants. So BYND is the obvious choice for most of these restaurants. However, it's time to look at some of the bear points. Everything is not rosy with this company. So about 50% of their revenue is made from restaurant sales, and the other 50% is made from selling their alternative meat in stores, in supermarkets. This revenue statement in the restaurant industry is going to take an enormous hit for this quarter. So their profits and their revenues should definitely be taking a really, really big hit because all these restaurants obviously had to close. What I've mentioned before, and what you should always be looking at in these kind of restaurant industries, is whether same store sales are increasing, which means growth isn't just coming from getting your products into more restaurants. Growth needs to also be coming from those restaurants selling more of your products each year. And obviously we can't determine that because of the COVID-19 situation. It's kind of messed up these numbers. So we can't determine if same store sales are increasing for Beyond Meat products. Another potential scenario that could really impact their prospects is lab meat. So lab meat, it's possible to do. It's just extremely expensive now. But if lab meat can come down to reasonable prices, it could completely wipe out Beyond Meat's business. So lab meat essentially is getting cells from a live animal and just taking the cells with minimal harm to the animal and injecting these cells. Obviously I don't know the exact science to it whatsoever, but making these cells multiply and creating meat without actually growing an animal, just creating real meat in a lab. Okay, so now I'll just give my conclusion on what exactly I'm going to be doing in this stock. So I think this stock is going to be a very, very bumpy ride for anyone getting involved right now because it's such a fast grower and it's at such a crazy valuation. It's going to be up and down because the valuation is very hard to pinpoint at this time. I'm also very attracted by the mission statement and the business model, going after the meat eating industry rather than just vegetarians. I think personally I would definitely be interested in substituting some of my meat intake with Beyond Meat products if they tasted indistinguishable and were also quite healthy. So I think that will come in the future, and I would definitely do that in the future. And also if it was a little bit cheaper and I was, for example, if I was a student, that would definitely attract me a lot more. So what am I doing in regards to this stock? As I was preparing this video last night, I finished up and I said, okay, I'm going to make a very small initial position, which is kind of what I like to do with a lot of these quite speculative extreme growth stocks. I like to take in an initial position and hopefully wait, just so I can track it more closely, and then hopefully wait for a correction where I can, if I want, then I can really load the boat. And if it never drops, then I have that small amount and I can cash it out in the future at will. However, I woke up this morning, logged into my investment app and saw that Beyond had gone up 7% today, and now the stock price is well higher than it was before COVID-19, which makes no sense in regards to the restaurant revenue segment. It's going to be extremely affected. So I'm kind of much more wary at this price whether to invest. I really, really like this company and I wouldn't scold anyone for investing in it because they have such an enormous potential in front of them, and I do believe they can grow into this valuation and well beyond their current valuation over the next 5 to 10 years. I think I will make a very, very small position in this just so I can track it more, and the reason is because its price to sales is historically average right now. If price to sales came down a bit, like the price to sales is 25, and normally we like to see a price to earnings of 25 for a fast growing company, but this is a price to sales of 25, so this is an astronomically high valuation, and I'll be much more interested if it gets down to that $100 price point, or maybe a little bit above. I'll buy some, maybe $110, I'll add some more shares, and if it starts getting below $100, then I'd be very, very interested in buying a decent amount of shares in Beyond Meat. So sorry I can't give you a definitive answer on this stock because it's a great company with an enormous opportunity in front of them, but I think a lot of people recognize that, and even a lot of newbie investors or people who are vegetarian and want to invest see this company and want to invest in this industry, and therefore invest in this company because it's the only option, and they're kind of buying it at any price that it is. No matter what the price is, they want to invest in this company, so they'll pay it. But we can't bank on them doing that forever. If the stock starts to crash, maybe they will start selling and the stock could crash enormously from this point because it's at such a high valuation. So there's always that danger. So if you are investing in this company, I wouldn't go too crazy with it. Personally, I would be very careful at these high valuations. But below the $100 price point, I would definitely be more interested. So I think this is definitely a 10x candidate. Even from this price point, I think it definitely is a 10x candidate over the next 5 to 10 years. If the stock price starts to drop and starts to falter, I'll be much more interested in buying the stock. But if it doesn't, well, I've missed the boat perhaps already when it dropped in March. And that's not the end of the world. There's plenty of other stocks out there. If you're liking this Worth the Hype series, let me know in the comments below. If you like this video, I'd appreciate if you could smash the thumbs up button. And if you haven't, make sure to subscribe because I release a video every other day, usually about tech investing or high growth companies, interesting companies like this. With all that said, I really hope you enjoyed. I really hope you learned something, and I can't wait to see you in the next video. Thanks so much. Cheers.